12th of February is the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. He is best known for his roles as Commander-in-Chief of the Union and the Great Emancipator. But more than perhaps anything else, his stature as one of the world's greatest leaders lies in the fact that he has been credited with ending the Civil War that ultimately resulted in the abolition of slavery and created the possibility of civil and social freedom for African Americans. The end of the Civil War redefined the United States as a single undivided nation rather than a loosely bound collection of states. This year would be his 214th birthday, and on this occasion, we take a look at his life and most importantly, the Civil War that had threatened to disintegrate USA into several pieces. But before that, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Oneindia. He was born on February 12, 1809 near Hodgenville, Kentucky. He grew up in a poor Kentucky and Indiana family. He had a younger brother Thomas who died in infancy and a sister Sarah. When Lincoln was just 9 years old, his mother passed away. After this, Lincoln's father married Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children, less than a year after his mother died. In 1817, he and his family relocated from Kentucky to Perry County, Indiana due to land disputes. He went to school for a year and then continued to study on his own to improve his knowledge. Later, his family moved to Macon County, Illinois in March of 1830. When the Black Hawk War broke out in 1832, he volunteered and was elected captain of his company. Few years down the line, he passed the bar exam and became a lawyer in 1836, and he began practicing it in 1837. Abraham Lincoln married Mary Todd in 1842 and they had 4 sons. Now let's come to the main point, the Civil War in the country. When America won independence from England in 1776, there were 13 colonies which formed a federal government. These colonies expanded from east coast to west, forming 34 states by 1861. There were differences between states in the north and states in the south, which resulted in the American Civil War. There were several reasons responsible for this Civil War. First, there was an economic disparity between the northern and the southern states. Northern states were industrialized while southern states were primarily agricultural. Northern states also wanted a tax on imports from Britain while southern states wanted tax-free trade with Britain. Furthermore, industrialized northern states preferred paid laborers while agricultural southern states, which had large plantations, were dependent on slave labor. Slavery had flourished initially in the tobacco fields of Virginia, Maryland and North Carolina. In the tobacco producing areas of those states, slaves constituted more than 50% of the population by 1776. Almost a little less than 100 years later, that is by 1860, the US recorded nearly 4 million enslaved black people, 13% of the population as the American-born population grew. In fact, the US history tells that 8 of the first 12 US presidents were slave owners. Proponents of slavery supported the efforts of groups like the American Colonization Society, who sent back tens of thousands of free black people, most of them American-born, to Liberia in the 19th century to prevent disruption caused by free descendants of slaves. Just before this, in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed by the United States Congress. This act made slavery legal in the new territories, but it was not unanimously well received. Pro-slavery and pro-abolitionists clashed with each other in a series of violent incidents known as Bleeding Kansas. The opposition of the new act was led by the Republican Party, a new political party formed to oppose the spread of slavery in the western regions of the United States. The final straw came when the Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln was elected as President of the United States in November 1860. This outraged southern states. The Republican Party had run on an anti-slavery platform and many southerners felt that there was no longer a place for them in the Union. On December 20, 1860, South Carolina seceded. By 1st of February 1861, 6 more states split from the Union. These states created the Confederate States of America and elected Jefferson Davis as their provisional president. In his inaugural address delivered on March 4, 1861, Lincoln proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. He also declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it existed or of repealing the fugitive slave law, a position that horrified African Americans and their white allies. Lincoln's statement, however, did not satisfy the Confederacy, and on April 12, they attacked Fort Sumter, a federal stronghold in South Carolina. With this, the Civil War had begun. Immediately following the attack, 4 more states severed their ties with the Union. To retain the loyalty of the remaining border states, that is Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky and Missouri, President Lincoln insisted that the war was not about slavery or black rights. It was a war to preserve the Union. His words were not simply aimed at the loyal southern states. However, most white Northerners were not interested in fighting to free slaves or in giving rights to black people. For this reason, the government turned away African American volunteers who rushed to enlist. Lincoln upheld the laws barring blacks from the army, proving to northern whites that their race privilege would not be threatened at all. Then, on July 22, 1862, Lincoln showed a draft of the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet. It proposed to emancipate the slaves in all rebel areas on January 1st of 1863. Secretary of State William H. Seward agreed with the proposal but cautioned Lincoln to wait until the Union had a major victory before formally issuing the proclamation. In 1862, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22. The proclamation warned the Confederate states to surrender by January 1, 1863 or their slaves would be freed. On January 1, 1863, he issued the final Emancipation Proclamation. With this, he officially freed all slaves within the states or parts of states that were in rebellion and not in Union hands. This left 1 million slaves in Union territory still in bondage. Throughout the North, African Americans and their white allies were exuberant. They packed churches and meeting halls and celebrated the news. In the South, most slaves did not even hear of this proclamation for months. But the purpose of the Civil War had now changed. The North was not only fighting to preserve the Union, but it was also fighting to end slavery. Finally, in April 1865, the Civil War ended with the surrender of the Confederate Army. A new chapter in American history opened as the 13th Amendment, passed in January of 1865, was implemented. It abolished slavery in the United States, and now, with the end of the war, 4 million African Americans were free. Abraham Lincoln was credited to lead from the front during this tumultuous period of US history. It was he who gave the famous principle of democracy, that is, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But he did not live long enough to see the fruits of his labor. He was soon assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, just few days after the Civil War had ended. And with this, a glorious chapter of US history came to an end. We hope you like this new video that touched upon Abraham Lincoln and his contributions in depth. Thank you so much for watching.